I'm David Batulis, the author of Perfecting the Brand American Medicine and Kyrios Relativity. Perfecting the Brand American Medicine was a 3-book set which described how to solve America's healthcare crisis by unifying quality and finance. That's led to the next phase of our work that includes the Seminarys Vane College of Knights. As I said, I'm also the author of Kyrios Relativity, which Kyrios Relativity is a book on natural law. It's a deconstruction and a correction on Albert Einstein's special relativity. The book is gaining ground, both in the faith community and the secular community, in physics and metaphysics, because it happens to be hopeful. It provides a true and also hopeful direction for our species to continue, the process of civilization. Whereas special relativity, which happened at multiple errors, which I elaborate on in the book. And again, I love Albert Einstein, but there were multiple errors in special relativity and a cynical, use of E equals mc squared, which didn't need to be published publicly. Sharing that publicly pointed the way towards destroying all of our civilizations. And Kyrios relativity, comes from the ancient Greek Kyrios, which includes main energy, which might include like a multilinear regression of removing any one of all the energies under analysis. It includes my Baconian style, empirical style problem-solving method called Suspect, which was published in Perfecting the Brand American Medicine, which has been very successful on comparing energies. Rather than talking about mystical things, like in physics, uses a lot of terminology like forces. And yet, in the field, what engineers, architects, and physicists need is to look at energy, because energy is irreducible, falsifiable, and non-homuncular in its explanation. But my Kyrios relativity is, again, taking physics and metaphysics by storm. That's why we've moved on to the next phase of adding the Sir Henry Vane College of Knights. We are a College of Knights looking for a match with a seminary. America has a plethora of seminaries, of which none of them are graduating knights. That is a coincidence of history, because America's seminaries originate from knights. I happen to be descendant of 2 knights that are very important, that I'll elaborate on today. One of them is Sir Henry Vane. I happen to be descendant of him through my mother's side. Sir Henry Vane was the 5th governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, who happened to found a new college in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We now know as Cambridge. We now know as Harvard University. He founded it as a new college built on Cambridge Covenant, University of Cambridge Covenant. And the town became even known as Cambridge. And the university had to be named something else. But Sir Henry Vane was the 5th governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, passed the law and founded a new college. He also passed the first religious freedom law in the New World, which is something that's really important, because if you look, from 1636 on, the New World has had a much more peaceful coexistence of different tribes than the Eastern Hemisphere, and that a lot of that traces back to Sir Henry Vane, passing that religious freedom law. He also had a vision of Manefest Destiny of spreading English all the way across the continent, which was such a bold vision at the time because more people spoke Dutch than English in 1663. The Dutch West India Company, occupied a huge proportion of the Hudson River Valley, in parts of the fur trade, which includes, some of the old French covenant, of which he is a person that did business with French, as part of spreading Manefest Destiny, with a guy named Pierre Spirit Radisson, who's a Frenchman who got British covenant paper from Sir Henry Vane and founded something that's now known as Canada, which included the Hudson Bay Colony, as we describe it, which ended up being a lot of the companies in the upper Mississippi traced back to Pierre Spirit Radisson, traced back to Sir Henry Vane Covenant. Companies like Radisson originate from Pure Spirit Radisson and Sir Henry Vane. Companies like the Dayton Hudson Company originate from that. That's where Hudson originated from, the jewelers, which he had a claim to all of the mines and all the assets in what's known as Canada today. Which is now part of Macy's. Target also traces back to Pure Spirit Radisson and Sir Henry Vane Covenant. So does 3M in Cargill. And in New England, huge portions of the manufacturing base trace back to Sir Henry Vane. Much of the rest of the manufacturing base in the East Coast originates from Jonas the Great Batavian, also known as Frederick William II, who is I happen to be descended from on my father's side. He came to America in 1773. He built a classic Batavian-style oppidum that is known as West Point. West Point included a silver mint. The silver mint was all of Prussia's investment into America. That silver is what paid for the knights, the artillery, to fight off the Dutch and to fight off the Redcoats in 1773 in something known as the American Revolution. The story of Jonas the Great is so important to America's history because he brought continental artillery, wheeled artillery, from the European continent to the United States of America. And the Dutch and the British were literally outgunned and outfunded by the Prussian investment. And the history tells the story of Jonas the Great Batavian of having, wasted the Prussian silver without explaining where the silver went, of which you can go to West Point and see the silver mint that is there. It's a classic Batavian-style oppidum that has silver mint. It has an academy that is known as West Point. It has ramparts with artillery. It had a hospital there, an orthopedic hospital. It was America's first orthopedic hospital. There's an orthopedic hospital that's still there. And it had a classic town center to defend itself because the Dutch West India Company was in Albany and in New Amsterdam, right up and down the Hudson River from West Point, which West Point was able to defeat the Dutch. In one of the most important stories in American history, and it was because the Jonas the Great Batavian had a gentle way where the family tradition was saying a crown is just a hat that lets the rain in, which is qualitatively different than the tradition of royalty in England. And so he was a man that traveled, as a king without wearing a crown and without arrogance, which is an incredibly American-style king. And not everybody knows that there was, the United States was a multiple nation alignment of French and other continentals from Europe with the American colonists. That was what the Continental Army was. And so America had knights at its founding, like Sir Henry Vane, like Jonas the Great Batavian, and those knights were so critical in the religious freedom and the cooperation between tribes that is noted as part of the American character. Because America has had remarkable cooperation between tribes, has been a remarkably more peaceful relative, to the Eastern Hemisphere. And so we're looking, we have 8 separate seminaries that we're asking to participate in an RFP, for our College of Knights, where our College of Knights is intending to bring 6 new qualitative chivalric orders back from the 103 tribes of shepherds, of which in 1910 the different tribes of good doctors were consolidated down to just 2, down to the medical doctor and down to osteopath. And not all Americans know that 2/3 of all the medical schools were shut down. Two-thirds of all the public health schools were shut down in a concentration of power into those 2 medical sects that ended up making those physicians everything to everybody. Where you have surgeons today that are seeing 25 or 30 patients for every 1 surgical case, when back then they had primary care providers upstream. that provided conservative care to patients that didn't need surgery. And so restoring that greatness and eminence and restoring the best of those 103 tribes includes reintroducing the 6 chivalric orders that trace back to the Good Shepherds, the Good Doctors. And the first of those is the Batavian Medici Latin, which is Epicurean first medicine. Epicurean first medicine in America traces back to Joseph Great Batavian, the man that came and built West Point, who built the first orthopedic hospital in America to defend the American Revolutionary soldiers that were wounded during the American Revolution. That includes the ancient traditions of knightcraft and statecraft, including enter a conter, which is a tradition of what a knight on down eats and what his horse eats. And for physicians, the analogy is really useful, particularly for those that are gastroenterologists, because the analogy of enter a conter is a unification of quality and finance, and that knightcraft and statecraft is something that kept the Rengen, of which the knights that came in the American Revolution to defend America were engaged in this ancient unification of quality and finance in what was known as the U.S. Army Rangers, and included the United States Marine Corps, and which was the United States Marine Corps originated from Dutch merchant marines that defected from the Dutch crown to join the colonists. And enter a conter is that Epicurean first tradition of what the right things to eat and the right preparation, for building, a Army Ranger, for building a U.S. Marine, for building a person that, wants to expand their principality, expand their kingdom. And that's the origin of U.S. Army Rangers and of U.S. Marines. Gastroenterologists function similarly, although your oath, your Hippocratic oath, is an oath, as a medical doctor or osteopath, an oath to be everything to everybody. And instead of being everything to everybody, you can have Epicurean first as your oath. That helps to be incredibly useful because you can be involved in the procedures that make money, and also the preventive care, and building out that preventive care network as part of the Regulus. The ancient tradition of Regulus was what the standards are for your population of people to eat. And gastroenterologists need to have more of a enter a conter philosophy of recommending a conservative diet. And that's incredibly useful for not just for gastroenterologists and for their offices, for their surgical volumes, for accumulating riches and wealth, but also for being upstream of other specialists like orthopedists, who are left with folks that have joint problems due to high body mass, due to not having that unification of quality and finance and what they eat, not having fitness in what they eat. Not having a knighthood approach to diet among the population that you serve. That's part of what population health is having a reckoning of the enter a conter. In the Epicurean first, Medici Batavian Latin tradition, the orthopedics is that second, or we call it somata conter, which is the somatic nervous system is the neurosystem, and organizing an accounting system based on the somatic nervous system is central to providing Epicurean first medicine to orthopedists. Because there are orthopedists that want to practice Epicurean first medicine, often at a higher price point, often with higher service for patients. And the right strategy for doing that is aligning yourself with the chivalric order. And part of that ancient tradition, they trace back to Joseph Great Batavian, again, that brought the artillery, the knights and horses to the American Revolution, that built West Point, built the first orthopedic hospital in America, is a somata conter system. So instead of having a certified and public account you'd have a somata accountant who unifies quality and finance in the procedures you do, in the volumes that you see, and make sure that you're seeing more surgical cases, fewer less surgical cases, and building out that network up front, so that you're not stuck with the Trojan horse of tomorrow's work in your schedule today and the 24 patients that don't need you, but rather seeing more surgical cases. And that's a part of the revolution that we've been involved in, going back 15 years and revolutionizing day surgery. So, physicians are able to see more surgeries, are able to see more patients safely, and as part of the low dose, no dose narcotic revolution in day surgery. I trace back to being a veterinary anesthesiologist, where we used very conservative alternatives in our NIH funded research. And when I saw early in my career, when I saw how day surgery functioned, we're using general anesthesia on patients that have an orthopedic problem. It's like, why are you using general anesthesia? You're shutting down the patient's gut, and putting them at risk for ileus and infection, and you're doing surgery, orthopedic surgery. I mean, you don't need to shut down their gut. There's nothing about their gut that is at risk here. And that philosophy of tracing back to the neurosystem is really critical. And it's something that I've traced in my whole career. And the best physicians of old happen to have been veterinary surgeons, veterinary anesthesiologists like me, and by coincidence, that was like a barber trade. I have a master's of healthcare administration from the best program in the world, and I know that the somata contour system for orthopedics is that second revolution, unification in quality and finance that physicians are looking for. The third one is Epicurean first medicine thermo contour, which really the best match for that for physicians out there is dermatology. And dermatologists don't think of themselves as doing a thermo contour, but that happens to be where the value is. That happens to be where the money's made that dermatology is not making. Dermatology can see more procedures, see more patients, and manage many of the physics, thermodynamic issues of their patients, of which the fundamental issues on those have been traced back to multiple sources, which I elaborate in my books. The second medical sect that we'll talk about today traced back to Sir Henry Vane. Sir Henry Vane was that fifth governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded Harvard University, founded Manefest Destiny, had the first vision of calculus, where he had a vision of calculus in the shapelessness of a ship. He built the British Navy that brought down the Dutch, which was remarkable given how long the run the Dutch had been. And the Sir Henry Vane's style of medicine was workability first. And so, as we're looking for that RFP of the seminary that can fit us, and does your seminary see Epicurean first medicine is a good thing, workability first medicine is a good thing, aside from medicine that is everything to everybody. And again, our role is like the knights of old in building an contour system. Building a contour system is the unification of quality and finance with that physician. We know that the kinetic contour system is really critical in work readiness. There's two qualitative neurosystems that are involved directly in work readiness. The first is the somatic nervous system, which we described, and the second one, it's sometimes called the misnomer, the sympathetic nervous system. The problem with the sympathetic nervous system as a descriptor is that sympathetic doesn't describe the fact that it's involved in fear, in activation of fear. And that happens to be, the issue. So calling it in the ancient language of horse shepherds, the pestic nervous system, which is right in connotation, right in meaning, is really better. And so the somatic nervous system and the pestic nervous system are united in the kinetic contour system. That happens to be the Kent English tradition, is appealing to individuals, bodies, and if need be, appealing to their sense of fear. And that happens to be what kind of medicine is practiced in the workplace and work-related injuries. It's a qualitatively different kind of medicine. There's medical doctors and DOs that practice that kind of medicine. It's important as part of regulation. With work-related injuries. That's something that we've been in my entity deeply involved in adding services such as acute injury clinics for patients to be able to be seen the same day by physicians, by orthopedists, rather than being seen in a hospital. It's been incredibly successful all over America in having physicians produce more quality, make more, and patients receiving better care. The third chivalric order that we wish to add is the life expectancy first. We think that's so important. And again, it's a prioritization. What's a chivalric order? It's a prioritization of the Hippocratic Oath, so that physicians are not everything to everybody. It traces back to, again, those 103 separate traditions of good doctors and good shepherds in America. And so life expectancy first was another one of those traditions, of which that's incredibly important in America because in the last 10 years we've actually seen a decrease in life expectancy in America. And so having a third new chivalric order, which is life expectancy first, so critical. And that includes one of our neurosystems, which is the confessicanter system. Because a confessicanter system is appealing to the patient's emotions, which is something that is qualitatively different than what is done in the other chivalric orders. But this is Atlantis American-style medicine, is life expectancy first medicine. The fourth chivalric order that we're looking at adding originates from my book, Perfecting the Brand of American Medicine, and leading expect is the quality improvement method, the unification of quality and finance, is first night, first medicine, which is the neurocontra, sort of the behavioral economics of providing a role model for how physicians behave and how patients behave, physicians on down through their roster of people. And that happens to be so important because America's healthcare system isn't filled with descriptions of role models. America's brands of physician groups, hospitals, are not filled with role models of the right way for a patient to be, the right way for a physician to be, and a physician on down through the whole care team. And pointing to a good example, pointing to a great example, is part of the tradition of a good doctor, the tradition of a good shepherd, that is, the origin of this thing that we call America. And so introducing and reintroducing the good doctor, good shepherd tradition of role modeling, of leading expect, of the unification of quality and finance, so people can learn quickly, is one of the fourth chivalric order that we're looking to add. The fifth one is adding what's called ability first medicine, of which the other chivalric orders happen to be disorder based or disease based. And one of the really important things is that sports really are, and healthy habits and activity of patients happens to be so critical as a component of medicine that there's physicians that want to practice ability first medicine. There has not been a building out of all of the ways that a physician, even a sports medicine physician or a cardiologist, where you'd think that there'd be a clear system for how their lifestyle would be given their training, that want to do ability first medicine are often practicing everything to everybody medicine. And Jotine Olympic, ability first medicine, where Jotine is the doctrine and Olympic is the language of the liturgy, because your body has two operating systems. One of them is the combinatorial DNA that you get from mom and dad. The other one is your Jotine. It's the discontinuous organ of mitochondria all throughout your body. And the Jotine is a system that your brain doesn't consciously sense, except outside certain tolerances. And yet your Jotine is the origin of so many of what we would describe as internal medicine. And the secret to internal medicine is not a disease-first approach, but actually an ability-first approach, and a sport-first approach, a Olympic-first approach. And so we have a Jotun Akantar system, which is the unification of quality and finance, for Ability First Medicine. We'd like to reintroduce, into the seminary partner that we select. The sixth chivalric order is Cure First Medicine, which includes a book that I wrote, which is Metabolic Topology. Metabolic Topology, a 15-chapter book on metabolic as the doctrine of, in large measure, that discontinuous organ Jotun, where topology is the language of the liturgy. Because if you look at how you cure diseases, topologies are the language of cures, and so little of medicine is focused on developing the topologies of cures. And so we want to reintroduce, the Good Shepherd, Good Doctor tradition of Cure First Medicine under this metabolic topology, doctrine and liturgy, which includes the architecture of our buildings, of hospitals, and of our homes. And see, Cure First Medicine is really redesigning the buildings that we live in for eliminating and eradicating disease. And the science of how we build today includes, and I love architects, but architects don't have an engineering training and don't have a medical science training. And yet the design of our buildings is so critical, because the airspace within our buildings is determinative in our health. The water systems and the safe travel of food systems, and waste systems in the house and in the building are determinative in our health. And yet there's almost no consideration for the systems and methods of eliminating disease from a building after it's occupied. And the air inside a building is, in physics, is seen as a fluid, and it's not identified how much microorganisms are in the air. And the COVID experience points to how poorly designed our buildings are. Because the building has to turn over air in a methodical way that eliminates microorganisms, and there's almost no buildings that ever took time to look at the blue collar trade of HVAC, which I have a family member that practiced HVAC for a long period of time. Nothing against HVAC, but there hasn't been a medical science revolution in HVAC in decades. It's largely the same ductwork, and the tape that's used in HVAC has become more popular than the actual medical science of having safe air inside a building, which is the source of illness includes inhaling of disease particle inside buildings. Clear and simple. The having fresh air turnover is so critical, and that happens in having fresh water and having waste removal systems. And the architecture field has moved in the entire wrong direction towards electricity yielding and trying to reduce electricity use, which is so well-intentioned, except that it isn't actually the thing that makes us healthier. And in the last 10 years, we've actually had our life expectancy decrease because we gave the public health decisions for building construction from skyscrapers on down, from hospitals on down, and residences, physician offices, to people that have no medical science training. And so metabolic topology is Cure First Medicine, which includes the old tradition of public health architecture, of primary care architecture, of secondary care architecture, of which that those fields can extend people's life expectancy, and are so important and so critical as investments that every philanthropist is going to join us in our seminary of choice, in helping take on the disease issues in the future. Because the solutions for if you look at Louis Pasteur, as a guy that eradicated disease, the solution for many of the diseases that Americans die from isn't necessarily going to originate from a very large academic medical institution. They're not designed to create cures. not necessarily going to originate from a physician in the field, more likely to originate from a revolution in architecture, more likely to originate from a medical science reintroduction of medical science to clean air, clean water in a building, clean kitchen in a home. Those things are not things that the more artist originating architects are drawn to, and there are not symbols in the architecture field for the microorganism parts per million to even try to take on organisms. That's something that we've done. As we've helped physicians and hospitals expand over the last 20 years. And so, we want to work with these seminaries. We have 8 seminaries that we've worked with, and we're looking for a seminary partner so we can get our Sir Henry Vane College of Knights, and as part of our plan to launch these 6 chivalric orders and graduate a new generation of knights in Epicurean first, workability first, life expectancy first, first knight first, ability first, and cure first medicine, to get away from the single medical sect philosophy that we've been stuck in, where physicians are trapped being everything to everybody. Join us. You can join us, donate, and participate in the RFP with us at profi.me.